Hello, my brothers and sisters in Christ. Welcome to Sense with Eucharistia. My name is Sister Eucharistia. In this channel, we'll be talking about the saints, the life they live, their impact, and the lessons, their miracles, and everything we need to know about the saints from different countries. That's what we'll be talking about in this channel. So if you're a Catholic or whether you are Catholic or not, if so far as you have interest in knowing more about the saints, you're welcome here. So stay tuned, subscribe to this channel, and wait for what is about to happen, because there are gonna be so much gist in this channel. Because I found out that ever since I've been into this YouTube, Facebook, I've never come so much across people talking about the saints. And that is why I have the zeal to create this channel, so that we will center our energy in everything concerning the saints. Because we have so much of them we are celebrating today, but majority of us don't know what their impact is in the society, in our lives, and in the church. So we use this channel to call them out one after the other and discuss about them. If possible, we make little videos about them so that we will understand what we are talking about. Because by me saying it or reading it out or sending it as a message, it might not sink within us. But once we made it as a video, I know vividly that it will most surely, definitely sink in our heads. And we will know the impact of the saints. Most of the time, people think that the saints are the those that things that not encounter difficulties, that not see anything like problem. They will not force it. They are just okay. God just call them. No. Saints are human beings like us. They pass through problems as we are passing today. They fall sick. They face challenges. They went through so much problem, but they stand firm, defending God. Their love for God is so much, and that was the lesson. They took their stand, no matter the wave of the whatever. They stand firm, defending their God, defending their faith. Some of them live bad life, some of them live naked life, some of them were even worse than we are today. But they really sorry and apologize to God with all their hearts. Not apologizing today, tomorrow that person will commit instead. But they apologize with all their hearts. God, we are sorry. Forgive us. We have sinned against you. God, I promise not to do it again. And they keep to it. They never go back. So anyway, we'll talk about them one by one. So that you know that in any level, whatever you are doing, don't ever think that God will not forgive you, that you've done so much. No. So that we will know that even the same commit so much atrocity more than we are doing today. Yet they go back to God, and God allowed them. God forgave them. And today we are celebrating them as saints. So I beg you, my brothers and sisters, just subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell, because there must be so much gist in this channel. I really have the zeal to open this channel so that we talk about the saints we are celebrating today. Because whenever we hear saints, we think that maybe those that are born with silver spoon. No. They saw hell. They saw hell. They encountered so many things. So, my dear brothers and sisters, we will start to call them out one by one in this channel. Anyone will call out, we talk about them. We watch their videos. We watch small clip about them. Like Mother Teresa of Calcutta. We know a little, maybe due to her charitable work. People may say she used to do charity. But no, some people may not even know that the woman saw hell. They dealt with her. She passed through so much difficulty, so much storms. So here we'll talk about all those things. And we know we're gonna make it in this channel. We know with this, at least, we're gonna draw souls to God. We're gonna struggle to live a saintly life so that at the end, all of us will see face to face. At the end, we're gonna see God. At the end, we're gonna see those saints we are calling their name. We are trying to emulate. So many people are answering based their names. James, Paul, Peter, Agatha, Teresa, blah. But some of them that bear those names, if you ask them anything about the name, their role model, they will not even say anything. They have nothing over there. And that is why I want to use this channel. Let it be the center of the teachings about the saints. So that when you hear your name, you'll be able to say one or two things about the person you bear his name. So that you work hard, so that if you're James, you'll be St. James the second. If you're Peter, you'll be Peter the second. Yes, St. Peter the second. If you're Teresa, St. Teresa the second. St. Teresa from Anambra, St. Teresa from US, St. Teresa from this, who work hard to be saints. Yes, nobody would like to be saints. Nobody would like to be saints. I too, I want to be saint. We are struggling to be. So we use this channel to tell each other, but we don't know it all. But at least let's enlighten us a little, so that if you hear your name or if you hear about any saint, you'll be able to differentiate. This is what this says is known for. This is what this one is known for. This is what the Padre Pro is known for. So that is it. Thank you so much. May God bless you immensely. See you say, watch next video coming up. Next video is coming up. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.